Great.
Hi, we're here today with Jim Klein of the American Benefits Council to talk a little bit about some of the things that came up in the stimulus package recently passed by Congress. Robert, why don't you go ahead?
Great. I'm Robert Whiddon, editor of Employee Benefit Advisor. Jim, thanks a lot for taking some time for us today. As we know, the House just passed its stimulus bill, and there's a variety of stuff in there. The first thing that seems to have come to light is the COBRA language. I think your group has already issued a statement on that. Talk a little bit about what COBRA language is in the bill.
Well, of course, there's a lot of interest in Congress to address and help people who lose their jobs and therefore lose their health insurance as a result of the current economic turmoil. So the proposal has really been to provide a federal subsidy to help individuals elect COBRA coverage if they are involuntarily terminated. Under the House bill, it'd be a subsidy for up to 12 months. Under the Senate bill, a subsidy for up to 9 months for anyone who's involuntarily terminated anytime from retroactively to September 1, 2008 through the end of this current calendar year. And the subsidy would be 65% of the premium. So the individual would only have to pay 35%. The employer would get a federal subsidy that it could take in the form of a deduction of its overall payroll tax withholdings.
And you guys came out for that or against that? I mean, is that particularly odious to employers?
I think that we understand a short-term fix and assistance is necessary and appropriate. We have focused our concerns in two areas. Number one, to be sure to make this administrable for employers, because there's obviously a lot involved in that, and employers need an adequate amount of time to get their systems to accommodate this. We think it would have been far better if the subsidy had gone directly to the individual and had not burdened the employer, to be quite candid about it. We're also especially concerned about the provision in the House of Representatives bill that would also allow anyone who's either age 55 or has worked for 10 years for their employer to be able to continue COBRA coverage, not subsidized, until they are Medicare eligible. To the extent that that issue should be discussed at all, it should only be done in the context of comprehensive health reform, not as part of a short-term economic stimulus bill.
Yeah, and that struck me as well. We've done some interviews with some other lawyers looking at that. It seems like that really flies into the face with what many employers are trying to do in helping to manage the health of their workforce. Because in this instance, you would have someone who is on the employer's plan while the employer is not paying for their premiums. They're on the plan. They're part of the overall health of the plan. And if they were off the work site, then they wouldn't be involved in any of those efforts that the employers are gravitating towards to help them better control costs. That's something that struck me that would be problematic for employers. Are there other issues that you're hearing with that particular provision?
Well, I think that you raise an excellent point, and that is a very real problem given all of the efforts that employers are trying to make to have participants in their plans be better consumers of health care. But it also is just an issue that theoretically somebody who is age 35 and has just worked for a short period of time, or has worked for 10 years, conceivably could be on their former employer's plan for a period of 30 plus years until they become Medicare eligible, even if that particular employer doesn't provide retiree health care coverage, for example. By the same token, somebody who's age 55 and may have only worked for the employer for a few months could also be on the plan for up to 10 years until they become eligible for Medicare. So that's a real disconnect there in terms of the employer relationship. And again, to the extent that this issue ought to be discussed at all, this is neither the time nor the place to get into that dialogue.
Now let's, and that is a nice segue into some of the other things that we're going to talk about. But before we jump subjects, are these things, these two COBRA initiatives, are they? Have you seen them before? Are these common things that come up when people are talking about COBRA? Are there sort of standard reforms that people kick around when it comes to COBRA?
The idea of extending COBRA until Medicare eligibility has been raised in the past. By the way, I'm cautiously optimistic that that provision will not make it into the final measure that gets negotiated between the House and the Senate and sent to President Obama. The other issue of the federal subsidy has not really come up in the past. It's extraordinarily expensive for the federal government to be doing this, which is one reason that it's a short-term subsidy. As part of the Trade Adjustment Assistance Law, there is a provision for people who are eligible for trade adjustment assistance that they too can get federally subsidized health insurance coverage. But again, that is done directly between the federal government and the individual, not at all as part of the whole COBRA system. So in that respect, this idea of a subsidy to the employer is new.
Gotcha. Now let's talk about some of the other issues, and it dovetails with your comment about this isn't the time or the place for those types of discussions. I want to reference a couple of editorials recently in the Washington Post. One from Martin Feldstein talking about electronic medical records. There's provisions in the House stimulus bill on electronic medical records. The comment in this editorial is that that's not going to drive a lot of job growth. Electronic medical records do seem to be a common a tentpole of healthcare reform. Comment a little bit about whether or not you think this too is sort of out of bounds when talking about the stimulus bill.
Well, I think a lot of these measures related to health care one could consider to be down payments on the broader debate on comprehensive health care reform that will be undertaken in the coming months. So even the COBRA issue is arguably sort of getting that issue out there, trying to provide some short-term relief to people. On this issue of health information technology, on the issue of comparative research, both of those are issues that, more broadly speaking, will be dealt with, one would hope, as part of comprehensive health care reform. But I think that it was Congress's view that under the existing programs, there could be more money put in. So I would say it's kind of in the eye of the beholder. In the area of health information technology, there could be some job creation or job retention that would be achieved through better promoting health IT. Certainly as a public policy issue, it's one that's valid. So there may be a connection there, though I don't know that anybody knows how many jobs would be either saved or created. But in that respect, this entire economic stimulus bill is a bit of a roll of the dice. I don't know that anybody, since we've never in our country done anything of this size or scope or on this timeline, could really say with any degree of certainty how many jobs would be saved or created.